Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Eliot.
And I'm Jodi.
Remember, we switched up, so you have to talk about the website.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So here's the deal. I can guarantee you that we're going to mention some really random things. It almost happens every single time. So that is the beauty of show notes. So in addition to obviously finding us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find links to everything we have. Oh, that sounds sort of illicit. Not everything. Everything podcast related at sohere'smystory.com. And you'll find links to our Facebook page, our Patreon page, and links and notes for all the shows. Is that okay?
Yeah, you did that
better. Did I mention everything?
You did that better than I did, and it's really a little bit irritating, to be honest with you. You ready to get started?
I am. I have a really good story for today. Can I go first?
It's all you.
Yay! Oh, wait, hold on. Before I tell my story, we have some really exciting news, and I almost forgot to say something.
That's right.
We have our very first patron over on our Patreon site.
Yeah, Mind Over Machines, really cool company.
So cool.
I know, it's just amazing. And as our first patron, we're not always going to do this, but I just wanted to give a shout out to them and to give their website. If you want to check out what they do, it's mindovermachines.com.
Great. And I also want to acknowledge our newest patron, which is Catherine Esposito. And you can find her at catscopy.com.
Very cool.
So thanks to both of you. Thanks to everyone else who's showing so much interest and who's chiming in on some of our questions and conversations. And we look forward to more. So here's my story. A couple weeks ago, I had a referral from a current client to this other guy who is taking on the role of CEO in a company. And he's coming into the company fresh. So it's not like he was in the company, he's being elevated. He is being hired in as CEO. And it's not a gigantic company. They probably have like 40, somewhere between 35, 45 people. So it's not like coming in as like CEO of Pepsi or something. So he wanted to talk to me about, and this was basically our get to know you call, just to see, I wanted to see what he needed and if I was helpful or not.
Right.
So we start talking and sometimes like people, they talk and I like to say I speak blather. So it all, people can blather all over the place and it just makes sense to me. It's my weird version of I see dead people. But this time
We'll have to return to that.
I speak blather, and so I understood everything he was saying. The blather made sense, but I was like, so what do you want from me? Like,
right.
Where do you need help?
Yeah.
Because he sounded competent. He sounded like he knew. And he kind of gave me some answer and that didn't really give me my answer. And so I tried another version of the same question. I said, what are you worried about? What are you like, what's the fear? What's the worry? What's the problem you're solving here?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't know how to come out of the gate. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I know that I need to like find out what's going on and ask questions and observe and shadow. And I know that's the right thing to do. But if I'm really honest, I want everybody to like be impressed by the things that I come out, my plan and my ideas. Yeah. And I want to make them see that I'm credible. And he was like, and I feel like enormous tension between those things. And he said it with such like, I don't know, there was like a tenderness. Like when you get down to the raw point of something, it sounds almost slightly sheepish. He's like, well, I'm afraid they won't like me is basically what the translation of that. When you get down to something that's kind of sounds like a 5-year-old could say it, you're getting closer. And then he said, and this is what I really wanted to kind of pinpoint today. He said, is that weird? Is that me? Am I blah, blah, blah? And it's at this point that I always like, I control my laughter, but I always want to kind of burst out into laughing because I almost just like, it always feels like this moment of, like, dear God, it's me, Margaret. My body's doing weird things. Am I strange? Like, yes, sweetie, it's normal that you're getting hair there. It's like leadership is this wild vat of uncertainty. And almost every single session or group thing I do, people want to know, is it me? Am I weird? Are we the weirdest people you've worked with? Are we the hardest people you've worked with? And I'm like, oh my God, no. Like, you're not even close to the hardest people I've worked with. So I love this And it's a couple of things. Like he knows that it's the right thing to do is to come in with the answers. Wherever someone wrote a thing where leadership is supposed to look like having the answers, like it's the wrong thing. Like that's usually insecurity coming out, right? Like I want to look good, so I'm going to come in with the answers. I don't know why it sounds like that, but apparently that's the song.
Yes.
There's a theme song for having the answers. It takes a lot of courage to just come in and ask the questions, but that's what leadership is. But that's a topic for a different episode. I'm just kind of fascinated with how much people think they're weird and goofy and broken and not failures, but that they're somehow, I guess, broken. Like, I don't know a better word for it. But do you see that?
I do. And I even see it in transactions. So I would have clients come in and we would go through, they're buying a company or they're buying out the company that they work in. They're buying out the current owners. And we're negotiating and there are sticking points and there are difficult things going on. And they would always say, is this a lot harder than it normally is? Is this normal? It just seems like, everybody else should be in full agreement, but we've got this discord and we're not sure. And
we're dysfunctional.
Well, as if everybody else is so sure and they know the way, but we have questions and that's somehow a weakness or a deficiency because I don't know the way. And I get that all the time. I get it in law and then in just working in general with businesses. But a real quick story going back to, which I know is the secondary point for your client. And I took a break from private practice of law to become chief operating officer of a software company. And I had no idea how to be chief operating officer. So these people had known me because I was outside counsel for a while. And there were two things from that experience. One was when I came in and I had to have, I was put in charge of everything from accounts receivable and admin and operations and sales and marketing and the warehouse. And so I decided that the first thing that I would do is shadow people in these environments. And I did that, and the warehouse was last. And Jim, who is the warehouse manager, apparently without my knowledge, sent around a company-wide email and the entire company, and this was about 90 people, turned out to watch me get forklift lessons. And so
I would have showed up to watch you get forklift lessons.
Well, it would have been on YouTube had it been a little bit later in the century. So, but what that said to me was, and I was terrified of this. And of course, I didn't want to look like a fool, although I knew I would look like a fool.
You were guaranteed to look like a fool.
Guaranteed to look like a fool. As you know, I have a marked absence of both fine and gross motor skills. And so what occurred to me at that point was that it didn't matter because I wasn't trying to take Jim's job. And if I had held myself out as the greatest forklift driver ever, then it would have mattered.
The greatest.
But these people, they know who I am, and they know what I was there for. And so it could actually be a relatable moment.
Yeah. Well, so it's really funny you say that because that is exactly, I said, so let's pause for a minute. Imagine for a moment that you are one of your direct reports at this company and you have been there for 8 years and some guy's coming in who's been there for less than 8 hours. Which of these feels better? Hey guys, I'm here. Here's my plan. Let's get started.
Right.
You can hear the mic drop on. I mean, like, oh my Lord, you would lose it if some guy walked in and did that. Versus, hey, tell me where you are, what your plans are, what your thoughts are, or where are your challenges? How can I help you do more of what works? Like the questions are one of my all-time favorite quotes. I'm not going to be able to remember the guy's name. Julio something. Oh gosh, I'll get in the show notes somewhere. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. I'm going to say that a lot. We'll put it in the show notes because I can never remember anything. But he has this amazing quote that says, and I think it's even more eloquent than this, but like knowledge is a love affair with the answers, and that wisdom is a love affair with the questions.
We're going to have to find out who said that. I love that quote.
Julio Olala, I think is how it's something like that. I'm sure I just bastardized it, but I will pull it up. But it's that I come back to that over and over again. But it's because of what you said. There's an authenticity to it. There's a connectedness to having the courage to ask the questions and to show up as a leader, not knowing. Like wherever it got written into history that leaders are supposed to be the person who shows up, who always knows everything, always. Now, to be fair, I'm not saying you always walk in and say like, okay, guys, so what do we do next? I mean, you have to provide direction, but that you earn the right to give direction by not having the answers and asking the questions and understanding. Because if leadership was a take tab B, stick in slot A, it wouldn't need leadership. That's following a set of instructions. The reason people and companies need leadership is that there are nuanced complexities that have to be navigated, and you can't see them until you ask the questions and pause and look in the interstitial spaces between things. So I just think it's so interesting, that impression that the thing that your anxiety drives you to do. I mean, this is a statement I'll apply not just to this topic, but many. But so often, the thing that your anxiety drives you to do, which in this case is to come in with the plan, to impress people with how much you know and how many ideas you have, is precisely the thing that will fast track you to what your anxiety thinks it's trying to protect you from. Like, it is the fastest, most guaranteed way to screw everything up. Is so often the thing that your anxiety is trying to like whisper in your ear to go do. So it does take, I'm not overstepping the courage it takes to do the other thing, but not only is it the better thing, but it's also the easier thing. Like, isn't it a lot easier to show up and be like, so tell me what you know. Help me understand what you see. Like, it's a lot easier.
And it's vital. I mean, even from that little warehouse thing, what I learned, in addition to the fact that I can't drive a forklift, was the fact that because of the way this warehouse was configured, if there's a load coming in and you need 3 forklifts running in tandem to unload it, that's fine. But if you need 4, you have a bottleneck. And so there's a timing requirement in terms of unloading this. And so if I didn't know that, if I didn't actually see it, go down there and try and work my way around and whatever in this dry run, if Jim had come to me and said, you know what, that's a 4 forklift job and we're going to need, double the time or whatever the factor was.
Why can't we have 12?
I would just, I could put on my executive hat and said, no, make it so. I want it done and I want it done in an hour.
Just work harder.
Just work harder. Or maybe I could uncork the work smarter.
You're going to get really fancy about it.
Yeah. But actually just asking the questions, because there's no doubt that Jim had forgotten more about running a warehouse than I would ever know. It wasn't my job. I wasn't hired as a warehouse manager, but I was hired to understand what's important to a warehouse manager. And I'm not going to get that without asking questions. And the other thing that I said, there were 2 things that came to me from that experience. When I was announced as the incoming chief operating officer, and I knew all these people, I had been on trips with these people. I had served as their outside counsel, and this was a company that took everybody on trips and things. It was terrific. So I was announced as the incoming chief operating officer, and there was all this applause. It was at this restaurant, all this applause, except for one. There was one guy who was the chief technical officer, who I liked a lot. Chief technology officer, I'm sorry. I like him a lot, but as a lot of software people are, he's unfiltered. And he was just saying what he thinks. He raised his hand in this group of the employees at a restaurant, and he said, why do we need him exactly? Why are we hiring him? And the CEO answered the question, and we moved on. And I appreciated the question because, and first of all, you live in fear of the question a little bit.
Also, that there was an answer to the question.
You live in fear that there's not going to be an answer to the question.
Good question, Bob. Actually, let's put a pause on this for a minute.
That's right.
Thanks for bringing that to the head.
But sometimes that's the fear, though. The fear is, I don't know why I have this opportunity. I don't know. I hope there's an answer to that question. I hope I'm worthy of this person's satisfaction, surrounding the answer to that question. But those were the 2 things. But one was definitely, even within that environment where I had some pressure to prove that I was the right hire. Yeah. To me, the best thing to do was go in and say, tell me what you know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was sort of, at the beginning of the story, they felt like 2 different topics to me. The questions versus the answers, and then this like insecurity of, is it me? Are we messed up? Are we dysfunctional? And but they really do both tie back to that underlying anxiety and insecurity that is just like, the faster you can get used to that being part of running a business, like the happier you'll be. But I even see it at the organizational level. I end up doing a lot of facilitation because of my background for professional services companies who are at this, they're somewhere between like 18 and 23 people. And there is just something that happens right around then when the wheels feel like they're falling off the cart and everything feels like it's a mess. And I often say to them, it's what made the Dear God, It's Me, Margaret thing pop to my head, is I actually use that because I'm like, how teenagers get to that place where their arms are too long or their legs are too long, their nose is too big for their face, they're tripping over themselves. This is that. Like there's something about that I think we all, whether we're looking at our own leadership path, like growing as a leader and taking on new roles, or as an organization as you're growing, I think we somehow imagine that you get to some point where it all works, it's all great. And I think we forget that every stage has its discomfort and it's like growth spurt, awkwardness, that's like teenage awkwardness of your body's not working the way it needs to. And at that stage, that's when you really do have to have processes laid out. Not everybody can learn from osmosis. But then the minute you start looking at everything that needs to be documented, it feels like everything has to be documented and it's overwhelming and you feel like everything's a mess. And while that's a lot to tackle, there is what I love about that moment, being able to be there and kind of shine the light on that is, and this is why it's important, not just because it makes me feel good, but because I think it's important for the organization. When you can kind of exhale into, I'm not completely crazy. It's what I love about this question. The reason I wanted to talk about this, is it me? Am I normal? Am I okay? Isn't because I think it's funny people feel that way. It's not from the mockery of it. It's that when you understand that it's a perfectly normal thing that's happening, that yes, that's what your body's doing right now or whatever, there's this like big exhale, and then they're actually able to solve the problems better. It's like if you try to hold on to the anxiety of imagining that you're some horribly malfunctioning entity and fix the problems, you're dividing the brain space. And so that's my fascination with it.
Well, and I think that you hold on to two things. One is from an emotional standpoint, am I the only one? Is there something wrong with me, et cetera? The second part is more intellectual, and some of it's pride. And you might say, well, we're reinventing the insurance industry. And so nobody has the same issues that we do, or we're looking for a special kind of person. And so the book that you have written doesn't apply to us, or nobody really understands what we're going through. And so you have this dichotomy. So going back to the teenager thing, everybody's unique in their, unique as their fingerprint. Everybody, there's no exact duplicate of a person. And yet there are striking similarities regardless of how different the personalities are.
Yeah.
And I do run up against business owners who say, well, I hear what you're saying, that maybe we should do this or we should think about that, but our business is completely different. And sometimes that's true. If you're running a landscaping company, it's completely different from running a small searches center.
Right.
I get that.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But sometimes there's, in addition to that emotional insecurity, there's an intellectual unwillingness to admit sameness.
Yeah.
Because maybe there's a weakness there, or maybe maybe we're just not as interesting as we think we are.
Yeah. Well, don't you feel like, and this probably goes back to sort of thoughts about teenagers, but actually it's all of life. I feel like teenagers, life in general, business for sure, it's this weird pull and tension between standing out and fitting in. You don't want to be different in the bad way. You don't want to be is it me? Am I the only one? Is it normal? There's a bad version of that where you want to fit in and know that you're not, pathologically off the chart. And yet you don't want to be just part of the status quo, part of the soup of everyone else. So especially in business, when you need to be differentiated, I mean, it is not an overstepped thing. So that pull, that tension between wanting to stand out but wanting to fit in is, I think, shows up in a lot of business angst.
It does. And there's that fear, so you don't want to turn to somebody at your networking group and saying, hey, is it just me or are you out of cash too?
Right.
Just so
not where you start.
Not where you start. Not kind of broad brushstrokes type of question. And so a lot of times you are left struggling with, being Margaret, where the only one you have to talk to is God, and so that's where some of the magic lies in being an entrepreneur. Just like there's a push-pull between standing out and being the same, there's a push-pull between being on your own, but not being your own, being the captain of your ship, but still being part of a loosely defined fleet.
Yeah.
Or having at least a flag you're operating under in common with somebody else.
Yeah. Or at the very least, a bat signal you can throw into the air and someone will come get you. Like the Coast Guard knows where you are. You're not completely on your own.
Yeah, one of my clients actually said that they wanted me to hand out what they envisioned as some sort of amber hard plastic tab that they can break and the bat signal goes up and all of a sudden the people they need will convene. And I thought that was really cool imagery and I wish I could do it.
Yeah, me too. Let me know when you have that.
Will do. So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week. And
listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, there are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.